Okay. Hello, everybody. It's me, Tsunami, and this time we're here to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, if you're like me, you're a little bit ignorant about the whole thing. You're not really sure how things started on your pedestal of privilege that we all have. I think if we're able to watch this video and we're not directly in the conflict, we're in a position of power, position of privilege, right? But ignoring that, let's just say I have an ignorance of the topic. Before I really get into this Piers Morgan and Hasanabi interview, which we all came for, I'm just gonna do a little intro into the conflict, not only for my sake, but for yours as well. If you want to skip it, there's a timestamp or like a little chapter, I'm sure. If you don't, let's just get into it. The conflict started in the 19th century. The UN adopted Resolution 181, which was also known as the Partition Plan, which aimed to divide the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. May 14, 1948, Palestine was created, which sparked the first Arab-Israeli war. Israel won, but with three-fourths of a million Palestinians displaced, the territory was divided into three parts: Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. Israel began to have tension with the other countries like Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. In 1956, Israel invaded the Sinai Peninsula, which caused Egypt, Jordan, and Syria to join sides via the defense pacts against Israel. June 1967, Israel attacked, starting the Six-Day War. This war was won by Israel and gave them control over the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, as well as the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. 6 years later, Egypt and Syria enact revenge via a surprise attack on Israel. The conflict was not beneficial for the attackers, but was considered a victory by Egypt, who was able to settle their differences with Syria over land. Through a series of ceasefires and peace negotiations, Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords, which ended the 30-year conflict between the two nations. Even though conflict ended for these nations, civil unrest began to form for the Palestinians who were living within the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They rose up against the Israel government in the first Intifada, or uprising. Oslo I Accords in 1993 allowed Palestinians to govern themselves in both the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and it gave them mutual recognition between their new authority and Israel's government. Oslo II Accords in 1955 saw to the withdrawal of Israel from 6 cities and 450 towns. In 2000, sparked in part by Palestinian grievances over Israeli control over the West Bank, a stagnating peace process, and former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's visit to the Al Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest city in Islam, the second Intifada was launched. This time, Israel created a wall around the West Bank. Meanwhile, Hamas, Islamist militant group in opposition of Israel, won against political party Fatah in 2006. This allowed the group to have control over the Gaza Strip, as well as military and political power in return. The US and European Union did not acknowledge Hamas, however, and they considered them a terrorist organization since the late 1990s. Fights broke out between Hamas and Fatah, which ended in Fatah conceding to join Hamas in a unity government in 2014. Fighting only got worse between the nations, thousands either injured or killed, with Palestinians suffering more heavy casualties. Hamas fired about 3,000 rockets at Israel, causing them to make an offensive in Gaza during this time. In 2015, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of Fatah disavowed the Oslo Accords and the territory divisions that came from them. 2018 only got worse as fighting between Hamas and IDF broke out. Rockets were once again fired in Israel, leading to an offensive response from them. This happened once again in 2021 due to increased tensions between the states due to protesters. On May 10th, after several days of violence throughout Jerusalem and the use of lethal and non-lethal force by Israeli police, Hamas fired rockets into Israel. Israel responded this time with artillery, bombardments, and airstrikes of their own. A ceasefire was achieved on May 21st, 2021, with heavy casualties on the Palestinian side. However, after the surprise attack from Hamas and the declaration of war from Israel that happened recently. We find ourselves here today. And as the privileged bystanders and the onlookers, there is one thing in my mind that we need to emphasize. However, I'm not going to talk about that now. We'll watch this interview, and when it comes up, I'll mention it. So for now, let's get into it. So we're about to watch the interview now. I hope you guys enjoyed the little history lesson. It's a brief history. Very brief. There's more events that happen in between. There's the whole religion aspect of it. There's a lot more events. So that was just a brief history of the overall general territorial disputes, I want to say. I just want to tell you how I feel quickly about Piers and Hasanabi. Hasanabi, I think, is hypocritical. I mean, you see photos of him, and then you have him, claim to be this liberal that is for the people, understands the people, the working class, blue collars, but he flexes his wealth whenever he can. So I don't know. And Piers Morgan, I think, is also hypocritical in a different sense, but I like him way more than Hasanabi. So that's how we're going into the interview, but we're here to be objective and we're here to be neutral. Always, always, that is the goal. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Well, now the battle of the hearts and minds, traditionally played out through diplomacy and propaganda, is being played out online. My next guest has almost 500 million views for his provocative commentary online, making him hugely influential. Hassan Piker streams live under the name Hasanabi. His analysis of the Israel-Hamas war has taken a highly critical stance towards Israel and Western media, and he's been calling me out for my coverage.
Because he only cares about Israeli citizens. He does not care about Palestinians as human beings. That's why it's apples to oranges. It's like one side is a human, the other side is a barbaric monster child.
Now, I will say, I think that's the attitude everyone has. Like, Israelis have with Palestinians and Palestinians with Israelis. That the other side feels like they're a monster. That's just war. Unfortunately, that's war. So a lot of this video, right? It's trying to, because I can't argue about the facts. I don't know that many of the facts. I only know what you guys saw in the beginning if you watched it. Just the overall overarching history. I'm not gonna understand the nuance until they get into the nuance. So just want to make that clear.
Said that, obviously. He says that he'd like nothing more than to come on to Uncensored and call me a baboon in a suit to my face. Well, here I am, a baboon, and he can join me now. I'm joined by Hassan. Hassan, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Did he actually say that? He actually... Oh, God. See, all right. This is my thoughts for how this is going to go. It's going to be antagonistic. Hassan's just going to honestly I think he's just going to strawman the fuck out of Piers. He's going to talk about the issues. I think Piers is also going to talk about the issues. Piers may... I don't know how Piers is citing it, but from what I'm seeing, it seems like he's really on the Israeli side, at least from the thumbnails I've been seeing in like different videos and stuff. Like, it has a lot of Palestinians or people that support Palestine attacking him, or maybe attacking is the wrong word, but going against what he has to say. So I think there are two clear, distinct sides. How they're going to interact with each other, that's the question.
Thank you for having me, Piers. It's very early here in Los Angeles, California, but I'm going to try to do my very best to not do my British accent while I'm here.
Well, I appreciate that. And listen, I appreciate you coming on. Explain to me.
You see what I'm saying? I'm already predicting it, but let's see. I don't like Hassan really just for this. He's so antagonistic for no reason, but let's go.
Why you consider me a stenographer for the Israeli government, given that in the last week, I think more than any other host in the world, I have given lengthy platforms to pro-Palestinian voices to articulate that side of the argument.
And I will say that he has done that, Pierre. I mean, at least from what I'm seeing in the thumbnails and the videos he's posting, yeah, I will admit that he's done that, you know?
No, I do have to commend you. You certainly have had more pro-Palestinian voices than the rest of the British media and certainly the rest of Western media in general. Now, as far as saying that you're a stenographer, I said that journalists are not supposed to be stenographers, and yet when it comes down to it, in most circumstances, in whatever conflict we may be in, there are stenographers for whichever party is aligning with the American State Department and the interests of the West in general. And Israel happens to be the one in this ongoing conflict.
But it's interesting that you call me a propagandist because I want to play you. This was your reaction to when the hospital got
I'm
bombed.
a propagandist.
Well, no,
For the record.
No, I'm not calling
I'm a
you that.
propagandist.
I'm just saying I'm going to
No,
play you.
I'm saying I am.
Okay, well then I want to.
I'm saying I am.
I just
before
want to
you
put
even play it.
Okay, I'm going to play the clip. This is your reaction to the bombing of the hospital the other night.
Look, I will say I do think Hassan is a very good performer. I think he took drama in middle school, which I didn't, and I'm very jealous about that. I think he's just an actor. He's just very good at his job, which is to show outrage when he may not have it. But that's just being critical. I'm being critical of the guy, not the character.
While I was in the process of getting ready for the stream, Israel enacted one of the singular worst strikes they have done thus far, and an Israeli airstrike hit the Al Ahli hospital in Gaza City, where thousands of civilians were seeking medical treatment and shelter from the relentless bombing campaign.
Now, interestingly, when you were saying that, I was coming on air too, and I took a position based probably on 30 years of being a journalist, running major newspapers, working at CNN and others, of waiting, of just saying, I think we should just wait and see what has actually happened here, get clarification, see who's actually to blame before we start passing judgment. You raced in to assume, as many people did, by the way, including the New York Times, BBC, mainstream media, and of course, most of the Arab world then followed, that this was clearly, indisputably, an Israeli airstrike on this hospital. And yet all the evidence now suggests very strongly that it wasn't, that in fact this was a rocket that misfired coming from a terrorist group inside Gaza. So my question for you is this: why would you
I wouldn't go that far.
Why
Piers.
would you be so certain in what you said before you knew?
Because that's not how you make money, Piers. You dummy. You idiot. You want to make money in this business? You got to react first. And not only that, you got to react hard. You don't do that, you're not going to make money. This is why you don't have 500 million views on your shit, Piers. This is exactly what he has. He has a lot of views on his stuff. I'm kidding. But that's what I think he's going to say. So, Hassan, let's see what he says.
Okay. So, first and foremost, before we get started on this conversation, let's understand something very important here. There's no electricity in Gaza. Internet is patchy in Gaza. There's no food in Gaza. There's no water in Gaza. This is all by design. This is because Gaza is under a brutal blockade, a brutal occupation by the Israeli government. Okay? So that plays a role in the fog of war and the misinformation that gets spread. Having said that, however, you made it seem as though there is a certainty that this was 100% not an Israeli airstrike.
No, I didn't.
And instead,
I literally just said it's not a certainty.
Okay, sorry.
I said the evidence is
Then I
increasingly pointing to this not being an Israeli airstrike. And that is expert evidence from people who have no skin in the game at all.
Yes. Well, I don't know which expert you're talking about, because I think Channel 4 did a pretty good job. As a matter of fact, I would say Channel 4 did probably the best job so far in analyzing everything that the IDF has said. But the reason why I believed, and I still do believe, that the likelihood is that this was an Israeli bombing campaign wasn't only because of the singular verifiable video, the phone video from the balcony that had all of the markings of an airstrike, the fact that the Israeli Air Force was enacting a bombing campaign in the region at the time, according to the Al Jazeera live streaming footage that everyone is using but doesn't understand, the fact that the digital media person for the IDF immediately came out and said that this was actually an airstrike that hit a Hamas target, and that he was sad that there were, casualties at the end of the day, but this was a Hamas target and celebrated it. And more importantly, I guess, the fact that this hospital had been bombed by Israel. This hospital had been bombed by Israel on Saturday. 22 hospitals have, as a matter of fact, been bombed by Israel since this last saga in the occupation. And this hospital had been bombed directly by Israel, where the cancer ward was destroyed. Israel has been bombing all of these hospitals. Israel has been calling all of these hospitals to evacuate over and over and over again. The medical professionals at the hospital had been called by the Israeli government the day prior, and everyone on the ground assumes that this is an Israeli airstrike. They are the ones who experienced the situation.
Hassan,
so when you have
but the
every
truth
single,
is,
can I just finish this?
if you watch the
Can I just finish this?
BBC, if you watch the BBC account of all this last night, by their Verify unit, which was specifically set up by the BBC to be completely dispassionate in these investigations, and they reached a pretty clear conclusion based on circumstantial evidence. I'll make that clear, that this would not have been an Israeli airstrike, including, for example, the size of the crater, which bears no relation to the size of craters normally left by Israeli air. So, look, my point is, neither of us know for sure. But you took to your airwaves immediately because actually your, I wouldn't even say unconscious bias, your admitted propagandist bias on your part was that you wanted that to be an Israeli airstrike. It suited your narrative. And I would say that that in itself, in its way,
wanted it to be
is
an
being a
Israeli airstrike.
stenographer. Well, you know, you accuse me of being a stenographer. I try and be fair and get to the truth. In your
All right, before we even get even deeper, what's a stenographer? You're asking. I'm gonna tell you because I'm also asking. Stenographer. Okay. It's a person whose job is to transcribe speech in shorthand. Shorthand is an abbreviated symbolic writing method that increases speed and brevity of writing. So I think the shorthand is the important part. Hassan, is assuming that Piers is being a stenographer, as in that he's only getting the most clippable stuff, the easiest things to write, and, you know, not really talking about the nitty gritty within the details of why Hamas bombed Israeli event, and then why the IDF has done all of their crimes, right? You know, it's like they're now accusing each other of not giving the full information as a way to suit their needs, which is what a lot of, you know, media people do, right? So I'm not going to say it's untrue, especially in this time of war where misinformation is everywhere. It's all about misinformation. So it's most likely that. I agree with that. It's most likely that. So we'll let's see how they fight about it.
case, I don't think you try to do that. I think you appeal to your audience, appeal to your base, and you don't really care whether the facts are there or not.
This is entirely unfair because you just said circumstantial evidence favors that this was not an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah.
I gave you all of the circumstantial evidence that it does favor that this is an Israeli airstrike. The reason why, however, circumstantial evidence is not enough. And the one thing that I will concede to, because when more information did come out, and no, I do not mean when Israel said that they did not bomb this hospital and it was actually Hamas. And then they turned around and went, never mind, it's not Hamas, it's actually Islamic Jihad. And then they said, we have more evidence coming out in a couple hours. And then the evidence came out, and it turns out it sounded like the phone conversations that they were able to intercept, supposedly, sounded like, by experts at the very least, to be completely false and completely made up.
Yeah, but Hassan, I don't think, listen, in all honesty, I don't think even as you're saying all this, I think you're a smart guy.
Piers, let me finish.
I think you've looked at all of this, and I think in your heart, you know this was probably not an Israeli airstrike. And I'm just curious why you would, instead of admitting that as facts change,
that is
your
not
opinion
what I'm
changed.
saying. That is not what I'm saying at all.
I don't understand why you would double and treble down when the evidence is pointing the other way.
You're asking me to be on your show. Do you want to talk?
Yes.
If you're asking me to be on your show, and I want to be on the show.
Oh my God. I hate that. It's so cringy. Look, yes, Piers is being pushy in terms of how he's asking his questions and not allowing you really to fully respond. You see that shit a lot. A lot of people do that just in life in general. Now, I can't do the same thing in life that Hassan is doing. I can, but I don't have, how do I say that, the social standing for things to be okay. You know, it'll be a bigger deal if I did what he's doing, right? Like, show me some respect, give me the respect. Hey, I may be on your show, on your platform, but I need you to stop because I have my own show and my own platform. You know, like, they're equals. These two are equals. I can't, when I do with other people, they're usually not my equal. They're usually above or below me. So it's different. Now, but I don't like this because it's like, first of all, you lose credibility as a debater. Is that you're doing too many ad hominem attacks. You're not attacking what he's saying. And then you're probably going to ignore it, go on in some tangent about something else, right? And then he's going to ask you another hard-hitting question that's going to deter you again. mess up your flow again, and then you're gonna have to go back, address it, and then re-talk about it, and then your credibility just keeps dying the more you argue. Let him ask his question, answer his question, then go off on your tangent, and do your best from that point on. That's how I see it. So I don't I don't like this. And Hassan's not the only one that does this too. A lot of people do this.
Show. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Let me explain exactly what I said, and let me explain to you why I think still, to this very moment, until there is a third-party investigation that is concluded by the UN, the International Criminal Court, or specifically a forensic analyst that that looks at the situation, is allowed to be on the ground. This is not just my perspective. This is B'Tselem as well, which is an Israeli organization that has also demanded a third-party investigation occur. I am not going to conclusively say that this was not Israel's fault.
I don't expect you to.
Because I just gave you, and not because I'm a propagandist. As far as me being a propagandist goes, everyone is a propagandist. I'm just honest about it. You're a propagandist. We have our biases.
I'm curious who you think I'm a propagandist
honest
for.
About my biases.
Who do you think I'm a propagandist for?
Who do I think you're a propagandist for? Whichever every media person is doing propaganda.
But who for? I've got to be doing it for somebody.
You think it's a bad word? I don't. That's just the difference. This is a semantics
I think it's actually quite a serious charge. Hassan, I think it's a serious charge to level, not as a podcaster, but as a journalist who's broadcasting around the world, who has a reputation, I believe, for being fair and impartial, actually, on these issues. It's quite a charge to just say, I'm a stenographer for the Israeli government, or I'm a propagandist. I don't think there's any evidence I'm either of those things. I'm curious who you think I am doing the propaganda for.
While we're having this conversation, 3,000, Piers, while we're having this back and forth, 3,840 Palestinians have been ruthlessly slaughtered in the last incursion into Gaza. I feel like this is...
That is terrible. That is horrible, and I'm very upset to hear that. I think Hassan's just using that fact, though. He's using it as a tool. Why are you saying that? This is the equivalent of me not wanting to eat food, and then my family saying, or my mom saying, look how many people are starving in Africa, and you don't want to eat your food? It's like, yes, I understand that is true. That is a fact. Right? But it's also true I don't want to eat the food. Both things can be true. So when he's doing this... like, yeah, it's true, but you're also having a conversation about it. You got to talk about it. So what is this segue you're trying to build, my guy? How are you going to turn this around? That's what I'm curious about right now.
An incredibly selfish, self-centered conversation to have. You asked me to be on here. You wanted to hear my perspective. I'm willing to give it to you. I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about Noam Chomsky style manufacturing consent conversations about how the media is operating in the behest of capital.
Pathetic. Tell me, no, come on. Tell me that's a good style. You're shirking away because you don't have a good answer. You call this man a stenographer. You're saying he's promoting Israeli propaganda, and he's just on their side. That's what you said with your full chest on your streams. Full chest. And now where are you? Now you have a chance to call him out, to really give your reasons, to dive into the nitty gritty, and then you're just shirking off? Come on, bro. Really? Pathetic. Actually pathetic.
Guy, listen,
I think
you were
this is
the
a silly
guy that
conversation to
called
have.
me...
There are dead people.
Listen, Hassan, I only asked you because you're the guy that called me a propagandist and called me a baboon in a suit. I was curious as to why. You don't want to say who I'm doing the propaganda for. We'll move on. I agree with you. There's a bigger picture here. Let's move on. Let's take a short break. Hassan, let's take a short break. I want to come back. I want to talk to you about what happened on October the 7th, get your reaction to that.
I'm not going to lie. That first half was embarrassing. Whoa, Hassan messed up. Because first of all, what did he really say? He didn't really say anything. He just called Piers a propagandist, right? He didn't defend any of his points. He admitted that he himself was a propagandist, and he got called out for everything he's done since he started the coverage on the Palestine-Israeli conflict. So, Hassan, what are you doing, my guy? You're the #1 political streamer on Twitch. Give me a year and fuck around and find out, right?
With me. Hassan, I want to just play you a clip of something that you said about the October 7th terror attacks, and in particular, the attack at the music festival, which killed 260 people.
Look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, like, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they subjugated you to a open-air prison your whole life, you're going to break out eventually when you realize that there is no other way to get out of it.
I mean, it sounds to me there, Hassan, that you are in some way saying they had it coming. Were you?
No, I wouldn't say that they had it coming. I think that Michael Brooks used to say, analysis is not justification. And while obviously civilian casualties and horrific barbaric acts that were committed on October 7 are completely unacceptable, the important thing to make sure that it never happens again is to analyze what are the conditions as to how it happened to begin with. And I think Ehud Barak is going to be on in a little bit as well, or maybe he's on before me.
Yeah.
And I'm almost certain that while he has held the keys to the conversation and held the levers of the power in this conversation in many key and critical points, I would go so far as to say that he is among many others who also recognize that the Bibi Netanyahu administration is responsible. This is not just my assessment. This is 85% of the Israeli population's assessment at the time. This is years and years and years of refusing to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority. Don't take my word for it. Take Bibi Netanyahu's personal word for it.
I would agree again.
In a closed-door conversation with Likud members, he said that if you want to thwart any kind of Palestinian nation state, you must do everything you can to only negotiate with Hamas. We control how high the fire goes. He has given cash to Hamas by way of Qatar. There is no bigger fan of Hamas than Bibi Netanyahu, which I hope one day you can maybe interview, and then you'll ask him to.
No, I actually did interview him a few months ago, and I
government.
did actually spell out to him that there have been a lot more Palestinian deaths this year so far, up to the point of the interview, than Israelis, and what he intended to do about it. He said then he didn't believe in collective responsibility, which is now this hot phrase in this whole crisis about whether you would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if when they...
Can I ask you a question?
Let me just finish my point. If they do then launch a ground invasion, it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. You know, I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing in Israel. In the last year, his attack on the credibility and integrity of the Supreme Court, I think, has been a disgrace. And I think it has fractured society in Israel. I also think that it's caused so much social unrest and had such big protests that you could argue it's taken the eye off the ball of the people who should have been defending the border because they've been trying to sort out what's been going on domestically, internally inside Israel. So I think it's a catastrophic failure of intelligence, of security, of defense, all of those things. I'll be amazed, frankly, if Netanyahu survives this. So I'm certainly not here to defend him, even if you do view me as a stenographer for his government. My question for you, I think, is this, is that I've had a lot of problems trying to get people on the pro-Palestinian side to separate two things. That you can say, as I believe and you believe, that the Palestinians have been maltreated for decades. That the situation where they are effectively, I mean, I don't even call it an occupation because Israelis aren't in Gaza. They pulled out in 2005, but they still control the ability of Gaza.
This is why I call you a propagandist.
I'm just saying the phraseology is confusing to me because the reality is Israel exercises control over people in Gaza. It allows them in and out. It allows them to turn on the tap of water and so on and so on. I get all that. They don't actually live there because they can't live side by side with each other.
That's why it's called an open-air prison.
Right. I don't disagree with...
That's why they call it the world's largest open-air prison.
Yeah, but Hassan, I don't disagree with you. And I have pointed this out for a long time as a journalist. So we don't disagree about the appalling plight of Palestinian people. But the issue comes that if you can't separate that ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine from the absolutely appalling barbarism of October the 7th, which was on a whole different scale to anything we've seen, where 1,400 people, Holocaust survivors, babies in their cribs, young women taken, tortured, abused, shot, beheaded, it was reported, and so on. If we can't look at that collectively, with a general humanity and agreement that is an absolute atrocity, then there's something wrong with this. And I find that the tribalism on both sides is now so toxic and so frenzied that you get people who literally can't. We've had a bunch of actors, right, signing this statement saying they want a ceasefire in Gaza and calling Israel war criminals and so on. But they don't say a word about the Hamas attacks that precipitated this. And I find that really hard to accept.
But you
And that's the big thing I wanted to talk about and say my piece on, is that yes, being aware of the history, the IDF, right, just like Hamas, have done terrible atrocities. And it is facts that the Israeli government, Israel in general, has a better quality of life than those in Palestine and Gaza, right? That also is true. So if they are fighting a war, then they have more power, right? They're the overarching force. And, you know, that's those are facts. It makes sense, right? So there's obviously a discrepancy in power, but, and I agree wholeheartedly with Piers here. Why can't you support your cause? Support it, yes, of course. What Israel is doing, just bare bones, what they're doing to the people of Palestine is disgusting, right? The controlling, the open air prison, all that stuff. It's not good at all, right? But if you can't condemn the murder of innocents, just innocent people, if you can't condemn the unaliving of all that, right? If you can't do that, then that's the issue. To me, that's humanity's issue, right? But no one's looking at it from like a humanity side. They're looking at literally the people are the other people's humanity, right? Palestinians are killing the humanity of anyone that's Israeli, and vice versa. They're not looking at each other as humans, but looking at each other as monsters that need to be vanquished in order to retribute past events. That's what it seems to be, and it's terribly sad. And Hassan's gonna piss me off what he's about to say. I can just feel it. Hi, this is Post Edit Stefan, and I do want to emphasize this. The war crimes. Look, if you had to compare the war crimes between Israel and Palestine, just off of numbers, what Israel has done outweighs heavily what Hamas has done. But both are condemnable and both are disgusting. However, I need to emphasize how badly Israel has done. Like, they've done a lot of terrible things that you're not going to hear in the media, right? Like dense inert metal explosions. These are dangerous explosions, and inert metals in general are very toxic to humans. So this is terrible, right? That's just tip of the iceberg of what they've done. They've also explored using white phosphorus, not only back then in the previous Gaza war, but also now. They're currently using it. They used human shields in '09, right? And they pillaged. They did what Vikings did back then. I'm not going to go into further detail than that. They punished all of Gaza and the West Bank, right? Because you can't really, if they're hiding amongst the civilians, then yes, of course, you can understand why they would attack everybody. But as the overarching power, the one that's controlling everything, you're punishing everyone. It's like human life. It's like the innocent people are collateral damage, which is disgusting, right? And then you have disproportionate force. They said that Israel was widely criticized by human rights groups for using heavy firepower and causing hundreds of civilian casualties. I think that's the real part. Is like the force that you're using is killing everybody. Everybody. The shelling of UNRWA schools. Now, I'm not sure what UNRWA schools are. However, when they say shellings, they're saying that artillery, mortar, missiles, like any. Ah, God, it's so sad to say. Any, just firepower. Schools were attacked. That's it, and that's. I always thought in war, right, there were certain things you wouldn't do. Schools, hospitals, right? Civilian houses. I always thought there were certain things you don't attack, right? So that's how you know these are war crimes. They are attacking journalists not only from back then, but also now as well in this recent war. And human shields. I think I mentioned that already, but they're using human shields again. So, oh, and then the biggest one, the most recent one. Apparently, there was 4 Palestinian men surrendering, and the IDF, found them video of it all. One was waving the flag to surrender. The other 3 were, surrendering, and then they were executed. So, hear me, please, when I say both sides have played their part in the evil, and both sides should be condemned. I understand one's defending their people and the other one's trying to defend their people, right? I get that. I do. Just such a waste of human potential. And as an individualist, it's the saddest thing for me. That's all I want to say. Back to the video.
But do you agree with them? If they had said, for example, that October 7 attacks were brutal and massacres occurred, and then they said everything else, that Israel is committing war crimes, would you agree with them?
Okay, here's what I would honestly say about that. Is Israel not allowed to defend itself from the worst terror attack we've seen since 9/11? Is it not allowed to defend itself
just odd.
after
You said you're not a
1,400 people in Israel
propagandist.
are butchered in that way? And the question then, if you assume that they are,
Hassan, I paused at all the wrong parts, I think, but Hassan. See, that's what I'm saying. That's the whole argument that I'm saying. Hassan, sees the Israelis as monsters. So, yeah, a monster shouldn't defend itself. A monster should just get vanquished by the heroes. That's all it should be. That's essentially what he's saying. So, Piers is a propagandist because he's saying, oh, well, these group of people got attacked. I think the only understandable response for people who got attacked is to attack. Regardless of the discrepancy of power and the forces that be, an attack is an attack. So you get attacked back. But let's see what Hassan has to say. Hello, this is another post-edit Stefan. I just want to say, looking back, I can understand why Hassan made that point, though. If you have a bully, right? Someone that's been consistently bullying you, no matter what you do, how you throw back, that bully is on you, right? If you have that bully, at a certain point, you're going to want to stop that bully the best you can, right? But the only way that it stops, if you don't have the power, if you don't have like another force, is for the bully to stop themselves. Because in a vacuum where it's just you and that bully, that's it. You may never win unless there's some outside outlier or influence. So I can understand, 1, what Hassan is saying, and 2, why many people feel like the Hamas attacks are necessary and justified, especially after all of those war crimes that I read before, right? While all that is understandable, from my position, if you involve a civilian, someone that's just not supposed to die due to your war, then I'm against that. That's, for me, it shouldn't be as simple as that, but it's as simple as that for an individualist. Okay, on to the video.
able to defend themselves as any
Piers,
free
that is
democratic country.
that is the
then the
Israeli
question
State
becomes,
Department line.
Hassan,
That is the IDF's line. That is the line that everyone
Hassan,
has
let me ask you
channeled.
this. It then becomes a question of how can they defend themselves? If their mission now is to get rid of Hamas, a terror organization that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen, if that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No. Here's why this is actually an abject failure, and this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything as it's ongoing. I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news, and sometimes that policy is violated, but ultimately I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So let me just say this really quickly. You said
blah blah blah. All that was blah blah blah. I don't even want to listen to him. We will, but all that was blah blah blah.
Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people think that this is a ridiculous statement. However, how Israel is defending itself is collective punishment. Now, collective punishment in the form of depriving 2.2 million people of electricity, collective punishment in the form of depriving them of water, of food, collective punishment of in the form of 51 people dying in the West Bank, where, you know, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet 51 people have died because in the West Bank, settlers that are occupying Palestinian territory in violation of the international law, settlers who are doing an act of colonial terrorism, and this is not my statement on it, this is international law, that are doing horrifying things by simply just existing there and maintaining the presence with an occupying force in the form of IDF, who is ritualistically humiliating Palestinians in a structure that B'Tselem, an Israeli organization, calls the permit regime, where every waking moment of Palestinians' lives in the West Bank are absolute hell, where they have no legal recourse. 51 Palestinians have died, and that was before the Ramallah protest that happened last night, and the Israeli forces were opening up with live fire on protesters last night. So who knows what that death toll has become? This is all a product of Israel being an apartheid state. This is a violent apartheid state. There is no way to be a peaceful
all right, Hassan,
apartheid
let me ask you
state.
this.
It
Let me ask you this.
is a violence.
Let
It
me
is a
ask you
violence
this then.
required for its maintenance.
Okay, listen.
And that violence is frustrating people.
I hear
that
you.
violence
I
is
hear you.
radicalizing people.
But here's
Hold
my-
on.
I hear
As
you.
far as Israel, as far as what Benjamin Netanyahu has done, as far as the war government, what they have done, Piers, going into Gaza
Yeah.
and bombing Gaza and killing 3,480 Palestinians so far in Gaza, 1,000 plus children out of all of those casualties, 22 hospitals being bombed, a bakery, the only remaining intact bakery being bombed yesterday. These are horrifying crimes that you would openly say are horrifying and unjustifiable when Russia does it, but when Israel does it, Israel has a right to defend itself. This is identical to the same talking points that I've heard from every Israeli administration official. It's the same talking points that I've heard from American politicians championing the exact same talking points. It's the same thing that I've heard from everyone else in the media. You might have been against the Iraq war, and you use that, but you're using that for evil, in my opinion, at this point, if you are not sitting here and condemning those acts of war crimes, those acts of violence, those acts of collective punishment.
Well, I would
Those can be condemned too. Why can't one? I guess I understand Hassan's issue is that there's more condemnation of Hamas and Palestinians, right? When they are the ones lesser, when they are the minority in the situation, there's more condemning of them versus the condemning of Israeli. And he believes that the media has played a massive part of it, and they haven't been really attacking. And I can agree with that because wars are now, especially nowadays, right? It's all about misinformation. Misinformation, how you use your information, that's what's going to win wars. And I mean on like everything from like the people on the ground getting the information to the people outside learning information, right? All that information is important. So to have misinformation spread, and if it does its job, it could be critical. So I understand Hassan's point here. I do. I actually understand it. And I think if he made that point earlier, I think he would have been a lot better in this conversation. Because that's a solid point. It's not really an eye for an eye. I mean, when it comes to war, you're not really going to get an eye for an eye. I guess it just depends on the tactics. But yeah, starving a whole country of innocents, shooting at protesters and all that. Yeah, those are. I'm confident that the IDF also does war crimes just as atrocious as Hamas. But I can condemn both. But I have a power of privilege. I will say that. I'm sitting on privilege. But I can condemn both because of the killing of innocents. For me, it's that simple. But obviously, if you're there, living either in Palestine or Israel, or you have connections to both, one or the other, obviously you're going to feel different about it. And obviously it's going to be harder for you to condemn the actions of your own people when your own people have been hurt so much by the actions of the others in worse or similar manners. So I understand that. People are losing their families, people are losing their loved ones. You know, this is not like no one's going to be able to have the time to think rationally and sit back like me because they're not as lucky as me. I understand that. But because I have this privilege, that's why I need to use the information I have, tell you critically and to tell you honestly that I can condemn both of these people and still wish the best for the citizens of both Israel and Palestine. So that's my take.
Say to that I think the death of any child in this conflict is horrific, absolutely horrific. But the question comes down to me that after an act of terror, as we saw on October the 7th, Israel should be able to defend itself and should be able to go after the people that perpetrated that, who live amongst civilians in Gaza deliberately. And the question for me becomes down to what is proportionate. I don't know the answer, Hassan. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what that answer is.
I do know the answer to that. I do know.
I'm very curious on what Hassan's answer is going to be. But you see, I think Piers is being very good faith in this interview. I think he's being very good faith. And I used to not like Piers. He's being very good faith. Because I also don't know what is proportionate to the killing of civilians. And it's what is proportionate? Did they have to wait for an event as well for them to gather and then shoot a rocket at innocents? Like it's tough. It's very, very, very tough.
The answer to that. Last night I had Dr. Ofer Kasif, an Israeli Knesset member who was expelled, suspended for 45 days for saying what I believe is the truth. Championing the exact same position of the Haaretz's editorial board. There are a lot of thoughtful people, a lot of formative Holocaust scholars, a lot of historians that all agree on the same point. The reason why violence that even penetrates through the Israeli security blanket that people thought existed, that penetrated through that Iron Dome, the Iron Wall, if you want to call it that, is because of years and years of oppression and years of violence, which is a necessity to maintain an apartheid state. And this has to stop. There's only two ways out of this. Either you engage in full-blown ethnic cleansing, and if you listen to the likes of Smotrich, or if you listen to the likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir, and these very unfavorable, unpopular, far-right figures, if you listen to Netanyahu and his Likud government, they say that they are interested in going in that direction, the ethnic cleansing direction, the ethnic displacement direction, or the only way out of this for a real solution is to move towards peace, to genuinely end the blockade, to end the apartheid, to end the occupation, and create a pathway towards citizenship for all people with a right to return, for all 14 million Palestinians, 5 million of which live under Israeli occupation. It's brutal. And then the rest living in diaspora. These are not unreasonable requests. These are requests that understand the dignity and the humanity of one side and does not simply treat them as their colonial subjects.
Hassan,
and it's the only way to create permanent security and prosperity in the region.
If it was as simple as that, I'm sure that would have happened already. I would say this.
Yeah, and it's definitely not as simple as that. So Hassan's saying, and this is, I'm assuming, after the attack, right? So currently now, what the current solution is, he believes that either they have two options, and he may be correct about the options, but the hope for them is very... Well, let's see. There's two options, right? The first one is commit genocide of the whole Palestinian people. Like, they have to go in, attack, kill every single person, and then start anew. I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't think the world will let that happen. The UN would definitely not let that happen. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that's not really a solution. And it's a terrible one. The killing of people, always terrible. So no. The second one is a full surrender from the Israeli people. Like, to just say, oh, you know what? That's it. Come in. I know you did terrible stuff to us. We did terrible stuff to you. You may have had the last straw, but you know what? it is what it is. We have to stop. Let's be free, all of us. And see, that is also very unrealistic because of all the high people in power, all the angry people who's lost families, right? There's just no this conflict is so complicated that I just know that there's never really going to be any peace between the two people. There's always going to be unrest. And the solutions are not really solutions. I don't think if any of them were to be enacted, I don't think it would work out. So yeah. I understand Hassan's eternal hopefulism. It's very hopeful of him, but no way.
I agree with a lot of what you've just said. Not all of it, a lot of it. I don't think you can ever achieve peace now with Hamas controlling Gaza. I don't think you can achieve peace with Netanyahu in charge of Israel, actually, after this. I don't think his own people will want him to be in charge of Israel down the line when they examine exactly how this happened. But we will see. But Hassan, I've got to leave it there. Look, it's good to talk to you. You know, you're an important, influential voice to a lot of people. And I think we have a lot of...
And I'm not here for the glaze, so that's it. I kind of want to get more involved in the topic. I want to know more about it. I want to know more about like the atrocities, learn the history a little bit more, and I guess talk more about it because I feel also very underprepared to talk about this kind of thing, right? I feel like I could have, if I had more facts about the history of it all, I could like interject and be like, hey, you're incorrect because of what happened in the past, right? But all I can really talk about is humanity, my place in it, and how I'm seeing things. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please be careful out there. Don't talk about this outside if you're an American. Just live your life, okay? And be grateful for the one you have. Again, this is Tsunami, shining out.